Hey, this is Ben. This is the 20th stanza of The Art of Peace. So I'm going to tame my mind with a visualization. And that visualization is of the image of the female form, black. Facial expression is crazed, wild. Long fingernails. Skulls turned into a necklace. Long limbs. Hips. Around the hips are bones, human bones, made into a skirt. The form is standing on top of skulls. Bones, human skulls. A dominating expression. A dominating presence. Now from that visualization, so bringing my mind to focus on that visualization brought my mind into the act of visualizing, which was me putting my choice, choosing to put my focus on visualization. Now I'm going to take that choice through the body. So this begins what's called introception. Not to be confused with interception, introception. And that's the ability to interact with what's known. So, in the sensation of my feet, I feel pressure along the entirety of the right outside edge of my right foot. I'm sitting cross-legged. And then I'm feeling it just a little bit on the outside edge by the toes of my left foot. So I'm going to adjust that because that feels unsustainable. And the second I just shifted, I created a more sustainable sensation in my left foot, but I in turn created an unsustainable sensation in my right ankle. It's tricky. Takes a little time to soften in. There you go. Now from there I come into my pelvis. Now my pelvis is in a little bit of an unsustainable position because I'm sitting on a tree stump. Remember the book The Giving Tree? The final end of the tree was it was still a stump that the little child, who is now an older child, could sit on. Anyway, it's sustainable but not in the long term. I'm kind of sliding off the edge. I did that to make it more comfortable on my feet. So I'm in making it more comfortable on my feet, I created discomfort in my sit bones. Not so bad. I'm going to stick with this for a little bit. Coming to the core. Core feels nice and empty, just ready for whatever. Heart space, shoulder blades are down, chest is fine, breath is symmetrical. Throat space, a bit of dryness in the throat. Saliva, swallowing saliva feels normal. Mouth, top of the head. Get taller in my spine. Exhale. I was just perceiving my body. And now I'm going to go out of the perception of my body and into my mental volition. It makes me think of the word vocation. Like, what do you do? What kind of things define your vocation, what you do in life? It's the same thing, but for your mind. What kind of things define your mind, your mental volition? Now, volition makes me feel like I have some control over this. So it's not just, it doesn't define me. It does, but I have a choice. I can interact with it and how my mental volition defines me, articulates me through fundamental beliefs, limiting beliefs, basic assumptions. So I was just perceiving my body through the more visceral surface sensations. Now in mental volition, it's kind of like I'm observing what I've been thinking about. And I've been thinking about Kali. 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 Kali's the image I just described. It's written down in a religion called Hinduism that Kali is representative of certain aspects of existence. Representative of certain aspects of existence. And the first aspect of existence she represents, she, just for ease of language, is change. Change itself. So just notice your breathing. Now just notice your inhale. Notice your exhale. It helps to slow down the breath to do this. Now notice your inhale. Notice the terminating moment of your inhale. Notice the pause. Then notice the inception, the exact moment the inhale begins. Notice the pause at the top. Notice the exact moment the exhale begins. Terminate, create. Terminate, create. Terminate, create. Terminate, create. Terminate, terminate. Be creative. Create. Notice the inhale. Notice the exact moment of termination where the inhale stops. Rest in the stop. And notice the exact moment the exhale is created. Notice the exact moment your exhale is terminated. And notice your exact moment the inhale is created. Terminate. Create. Terminate. Create. So the yogis created Kali to describe that moment. That moment where the inhale terminates and the exhale creates. That act, that rhythm moving through, that change, that piece of existence right there with Kali. See, they were using yoga as a means to enter their mental volition. And through getting out of the form of the external world, the feel of the internal world, the perception of the internal world, and then fundamental beliefs, they began to interact with life from the level of consciousness. Interacting with life from the level of consciousness means that you have the capacity to see these pieces without being interrupted, like, what am I going to eat for dinner? Or, I should have paid that parking ticket, or I got to pay that bill. So they're able to spend time in consciousness. And inside of consciousness is infinity. It shows up anytime you feel complete immersion. If you've never felt that, you've seen it if you've ever watched sports, or you've ever watched entertainment, if you've ever watched something fully expressive and organic, if you've ever been in a conversation that flowed like a smooth mountain stream, you've been inside of consciousness. So as you practice, remember, you armor down gets you to zero. The art of peace starts to build. You start to build. What can you build that's sustainable? So anyway, consciousness, you're interacting with the fullness of life as it is. Now, here's what's interesting about Kali. She's described from the perspective of the darkness. She's not. She's described from the perspective of termination instead of creation. Creation is what she does, but she's described from the perspective of darkness, and it's a funky reality in that you can't have the inhale without the exhale. The inhale is not the exhale, but you can't have the exhale without the inhale, and vice versa. You just can't have one without the other. So anyway, the yogis described Kali from the perspective of darkness, which I have found to be really accurate, or at least helpful with me interacting with the darkness that I have, the nastiest parts of who I am, the yuck. And the reason why I think it's helpful for me is when the yuck shows up, I'm not ashamed. I don't think something's wrong with me. I don't think I'm broken. I just recognize that that's also a part of who I am. I'm the termination of the inhale and the creation of the exhale. I am the termination of the exhale. I am the creation of the inhale. I'm that cycle. I am that spectrum. And included in that spectrum is the yuck. I don't want to tell you this. If you knew this, you'd run. I'm ashamed that this has even entered my mind. The rage and passions. Rage, I'll fucking kill that motherfucker. Like, I'll have, and I remember very, very often in football, being at football games, and if a player got injured, screaming at him to suck it up. Oh my gosh. I remember the most inappropriate thing I've ever done was at a football game. A father was with his son at a football game, and I was being drunk and belligerent and screaming at the field. And he asked me to not do that. His son was around, and I was affronted by this. Fuck you, blah, blah, blah. So at the end of the game, I walked over to where he was seated, and I just screamed up at him, "Hey kid, your father's a punk ass bitch," and just walked away. And it was just such an awful thing. I also treated some Dallas Cowboys fans, some Denver Broncos fans. Yeah, man, jeez. Denver Broncos fans really poorly after we beat them. And then I used my military veteran status as a trump card and shut them up and really made them feel terrible. Ugh. I'm very ashamed that I did that. That said, I acknowledge that I've done it. I acknowledge that the capacity to do that is inside of me, and so I try to be clear. I try to be clear and of my awareness, of my being, in order to notice if any of my actions are being driven by such a thing. And so I think the yogis put special interest or emphasis on her description in this light as a way to emphasize the power of the dark side of the force. Emphasizing the power of the dark side. Don't be afraid of the dark side. It's not having more of one than other. It's being the awareness of both. And Callie's that termination and creation. Termination and creation. She's the fact that termination and creation exist, not termination or creation. She's beyond time. Each is complementing the next in both directions all the time to infinity. And you armor down, gets you to zero. And then you build with the art of peace. And what you start to build into is every part of you. And as every part of you becomes accepted by your mental volition and seen from the level of consciousness, you get to interact in ways that strategically enable you to interact from efficiency. Enable you to interact from efficiency as opposed to just reacting. You have awareness of the whole spectrum of what's going on, so you get to choose. You get to choose. Now, as you do that over and over again, you begin to become wise. So Kali is recognized as wisdom. Her energy is wisdom. Intuited wisdom. So wisdom that comes from within, not necessarily knowledge which comes from without. So the wisdom, as you practice seeing your full spectrum, the wisdom of seeing the full spectrum becomes embodied. And the path of nature just takes its course. Termination precedes creation. Creation precedes termination. It's the ebb and flow of nature. So Sensei talks about this all the time, and he talks about it again in stanza 20. Always keep your mind as bright and clear as the vast sky, the great ocean, and the highest peak, empty of all thoughts. Always keep your body filled with light and heat. Fill yourself with the power of wisdom and enlightenment. See? What we've done throughout time is we've created infinite ways of describing the same kinds of things. And so all we did today was we just described something that's been described a zillion times by talking about Kali, by talking about the art of peace, by breathing. King, out.